Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast.
We see the syphilitic shrinking obelisk, the white man's wilting dick. We see through dangling jowls of seedy game show trolls the smiling lie of the televised hive. The witches are watching with their thousand eyes. Witches are watching with their thousand eyes. We smell rotten teeth that speak beyond belief. A stick inside their skull would...
Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 56. This episode is sponsored by the fine folks at Lee's Comics. Artist and previous podcast guest Scott Shaw has finished the cover artwork for Headquartered, the book on the monkey's solo career, and it should be out in February or March of 2020. I won't be making the trek to Beetlefest, unfortunately, but my co-author and also previous podcast guest, Michael A. Ventrella, will be attending and selling copies there. I've gotten the final art pieces and text from Victoria Biggers for the TTV scrapbook, so I'll be finalizing that book and turning it in soon. I still plan to work on some new Harvey comic stories with previous podcast guest Eric Schanauer. And I'm still waiting for the Warren Kremer book from my publisher, and I'm still working on my own Light Up Your Life travel agency, and of course the Mad book. Our guest today has drawn the Dennis the Menace Sunday page for over 30 years. He also drew the Dennis the Menace comic book when it was published by Marvel. Here he is, Ron Ferdinand. Okay, on the phone today we have Ron Ferdinand, who is the artist on Dennis the Menace, typically on the Sunday strips, correct?
Yes, Sunday, yeah.
Okay. And just wanted to say thank you for being on the podcast, and just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in art and how you got involved with working on Dennis the Menace.
Okay. Well, you know, I grew up, I was born in 51. I lived in Manhattan. And on West End Avenue, actually where they filmed the West Side Story. And 68th Street and West End Avenue, which is one of the main blocks where West Side Story was filmed. So that was filmed. So it was back when I was living there, it was an Italian ghetto. It was all Italians from like 63rd Street to 69th or around there. It was all Italians. So then in like 58, they made us all, we all left, and then they filmed, they filmed West Side Story in like 60 or whatever it was, 60. And then they tore it all down and built Lincoln Center.
Oh, wow.
You know? Yeah, so we went one day and watched the filming, you know, so we stood outside and looked down at our old block, and we saw them dancing down the streets and everything, you know, the Jets and the Sharks, right by our old building. And so anyway, so then I moved to Queens, and so as far as art, you know, I always loved to draw. I was always drawing on, you know, those notebooks with the black and white ones with the little, what are they, the Metropolitan, what were they called, those little notebooks?
The composition ones, or?
I should have wrote that down. Well, composition books, yeah. So I used to, you know, do stories, and I just filled those things up endlessly, you know, and then, but I went to I grew up Catholic, so I went to Catholic grammar school and high school where they had zero art. You know, there was no art courses, you know, or anything. So everything I did on my own. And then when I was about 12, I saw the art instruction school's advertisement. I drew, I think it was Winky, you know, drew Winky,
right.
And I mailed it in. And I was probably 12 or 13 at that point. And so, you know, they came out and interviewed, you know, showed me the setup and everything. And then I said, yes, I want to do this, you know. And so my mother agreed. So she, you know, she paid for it. And then I did about 2 lessons, and I don't know, I just kind of lost track. I just couldn't, it was like homework, you know. It was like they'd send me the lesson, and it got to, so I did about 2 or 3 of them, and I couldn't even force myself to do anything. I don't know, it was just I was just a kid, you know, so I couldn't discipline myself to do it and everything. So I did about 2 of them, and then my mother had paid for the whole thing, and then. So then after I stopped sending, so then they would send me these letters. I wouldn't send in my assignments, and then they get all these like motivational letters from them saying, Ron, the road to success is paved with persistence, and we have to keep. So they kept sending me these motivational letters, instead. And so I always looked, back at that was like I felt bad because my mother paid for it, and so I always felt that I had to pay her back for that at some point in my life.
Now, did you draw anyway? You just didn't do the assignments, or did you not draw at all?
Oh, yeah. No, I drew. Oh, yeah. No, I was always drawing. I drew. Yeah, I was. But as far as sitting down and to give these lessons and shading and whatever it was, and it was required real self-discipline, which I didn't have. I mean, as far as reading the lesson and then doing it and then mailing, it was just something I could not. And I regretted it, later on. It probably would have been very educational. So then, I went to high school, and then I graduated from Catholic high school, and then I went to St. John's University for 6 months, and I knew at that point that I didn't want to pursue an academic career. So then I left. I got a job in Macy's in Herald Square. I worked there. And then I enrolled in visual arts, And I went to the School of Visual Arts for 3 years. And I studied, had some great teachers. I had John Culhane was one of my animation history teacher. Let's see who else I had. Howard Beckerman for animation. You're familiar with these guys?
Yeah.
And Martin Abrams, Gil Moret was my animation. He was an old Paramount guy. He worked at Paramount Studios, and he would always tell us all the stories about Paramount Studios and everything. There's some real great teachers there. And then we had guest speakers, all the time. And my last year there was really great. And then they had Milt Call came and gave us, a lecture. And Richard Williams came, and he was actually at a nearby. I forget what it was. I think it was he had a show, and they were showing the Christmas Carol. He had just done the Christmas Carol, and that was being shown on TV. But then they had a showing. I think it was at. I'm not sure. I think it was in Lincoln Center, one of the theaters. Anyway, so John, it was for John. So John Culhane was asking people if they wanted to be ushers. So I went. I volunteered. I said definitely be an usher. So I went and I ushered for that. And Richard Williams was there, and they showed the movie. And then unfortunately, I was so I had duties to do. I had to usher people in and stuff. So a lot of it I ended up missing because I had volunteered to be an usher.
Great.
Yeah. So that was just it. So anyway, but he spoke, and it was great. And he had I was spoken at Visual Arts also. And so anyway, so Milt Call came, and then this is my last semester there, and he said, we're looking, Disney's hiring. This was like 76 or 75. I think it was 75. And so he said we're looking, they would replenish their animation staff, and and that was my dream. I said, damn, that's what I want to do. And they said, just all we want to see is your life drawing. That's all we care about is your life drawing sketches. We just want to see, we're looking for, artists who know the body and who can, and that's really all you have to. They said that's really the main, what we're interested in. So here I was. I had 3 years of I studied. I took a life drawing class, of course, and I had model sketches, but I had spent so much time because in my animation class we had to do a film. So we had to do, and not only we would draw it, but we had to do the cells. We had to film it. We had to do everything.
Wow.
So here I was. So I had chosen for my final film. I had "You Never Give Me Money," the Beatles song on Abbey Road, and so here I was spending all the every free moment painting, doing the drawings, then painting the cells, literally doing everything myself, filming it. So I had spent so much time on production stuff that I wasn't concentrating on the one thing that Disney was interested in, which was your drawing. So anyway, and then when he said that, he said, "No, all we want to see." So I mailed my life drawing stuff out there, and sat breathlessly waiting, and then they returned my package, and they said, your work is good, but we're looking for Michelangelo's.
Wow.
And yeah. So it was kind of, I was okay. I mean, I of course, that was their professional evaluation. So what I did was, that was very disappointing. So then I went back to the Art Students League for a year to study strictly animation. I just studied, not animation, anatomy. So I had this teacher, Gustav Reberger. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He was like he did all these massive fine arts paintings.
Okay. No, I haven't, but okay.
And anyway, yeah. So he was teaching this course in animation. Anatomy. So I went there for a year and just really studied intensely anatomy, and he really, brought us into it, and it was just a classic European study of the body and everything, and it was great. But then, by that time, this was like a year after visual arts, and I had graduated. I went back to work. I was working at Macy's, back at Macy's, and then I got married. And so this was like 78, 79, and then I got a job at a screen printing place doing electronics. It was like I did silk screening. We made printed circuit boards.
Wow.
So, I was doing that. It was like screen printing. So it was like, screen. There was some art involved, but you're working with the circuit board design and everything. So I kind of deluded myself into thinking I was doing some kind of artistic work. But, yeah. So, so I did that for about 5 years. And then I left there, and then I was working then I went back to SVA for Ed Knight to study paste up and mechanicals. This is still when they were doing everything by hand, rubber cement, pasting up. It was all, the old school paste up. So I went for a year and I took night courses in that, thinking, I'll get back into some kind of artistic thing. And then I did that, and then I got a job in a real estate office.
Wow.
And I was, as a delivery, I was working in Manhattan, delivering all over the city, just delivering envelopes and everything. I was like a delivery. So then at this time, I'm saying I have to get, I was almost 30. I was hitting 30. I was like 29. And so I started sending out little sketches and stuff. And then I did a few interviews. I went to Archie Comics. And I had done some sketches of the Archie characters, and I went to see them. And they liked the sketch. I said, yeah, you're pretty good. And they gave me a story, a script to pencil, So I did that, I brought it back, and that was it. That was as far as it went. Didn't really go anywhere. Went to a couple of ad agencies and stuff, and nothing. So then I was kind of, starting to think, oh boy, this is getting tough now. And then, lo and behold, all this time I'm subscribing to Cartoonist Profiles with Judd Hurt's magazine, and I'm reading all these interviews with all these, cartoonists and everything, and they were very good. They're really hands-on interviews, very practical stuff, and I used to love it. It was like a quarterly thing, I think. And then, so lo and behold, in 1980, there was an interview with Hank Ketchum. And he, it was 19. I still have it here. I bring it around when I do talks, and I say this is really started it all. So in the interview, he goes on to mention he had moved back to Monterey, Pebble Beach from Switzerland. He had been in Geneva for like 15 years, and then, he was thinking of starting a training program. And so I was a huge Hank Ketchum fan. I thought, and the fact that he had worked at Disney's, and he agreed with Pinocchio and Snow White and everything, and I was like, wow. So anyway, so he mentioned, and it was kind of rare. He gave his address, in the interview. And which they don't all day. Yeah, so he said, Judd, if keep your eyes open, and if you see any possibilities, send him to drop me a line. And he gave his address. So I'm sitting there, and in Queens, and I'm thinking, wow, I have nothing to lose. So I went out and bought a few, Dennis paperbacks and did some sketches of the characters, and never thinking, that would anything would come of it. So I got them together in a package, mailed them out. And I figured that was the end of it. So about 2 weeks later, all of a sudden I get over my mailbox, and there's a letter with Dennis the Menace on it. So I opened it. I was like, wow. I thought maybe it's just thanks for your submission and whatever. And so I opened it, and it's like it's from Hank. And he says, well, Ron, I liked your samples. And I've already hired 2 other artists, but in that I may be looking for another one, whatever. So in that respect, send me a resume, a photograph. He wanted to see a photograph, of myself. So he said, take your time with this. There's no hurry. And but of course, I immediately got it. Next day I had it written back in the mail. And as far as my resume, I was kind of like, I had done a couple of little things for some local things in Queens there. So, I kind of padded that a little bit and said, accept that. But I really had no stuff, which turned out to be work in my favor with Hank, because I wasn't really an accomplished anything,
Right.
Which is, I guess, what he was looking for, someone that he could kind of. So I mailed that out, and then, thinking, well, this is. So, like, a couple of weeks later, sure enough, I get another letter from Hank, I'm going, wow, now this is, And then he sent me a couple of gags. He said, just, take your time, there's no hurry. Just, he gave me like 3 or 4 gag flips, and he said, just, let me see what you do with these and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So then I, worked on, got them right out. Like the next day, I stayed up all night, and yeah.
Even though he said, take your time. Anyway.
I'm sorry. Yeah. And he was saying, he was just saying, Ron, there's absolutely no hurry with these. Just, take your time. So I mailed those out, and then a couple of weeks later, he goes, all right, I liked you again, and then I liked your, and he corrected them, which I still have. Actually, I posted a lot, I think a couple of them on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my correspondence with Hank during that time is I have actually posted it, so it's actually on Facebook if you go way back a couple of years in my, and with his corrections, my sketches and his corrections are on there. And then he goes, so now I'm thinking, okay, where's this going to go now? So then he said, and he threw it out there. He said, listen, I have 2 artists, and we're in Monterey. I don't know if you've ever been out here, which I hadn't. And I'm thinking of maybe bringing you out, for a week or a couple of weeks and see, if you like the area and everything, if you'd be interested.
Mm-hmm.
So, here I am, bam, okay, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, in the meantime, I'm working on they work on the Marvel comics, so they said, here's a cover I was going to do for the birthday issue. Had Dennis with a birthday cake or something. So he goes, let me see what you ink this. It was like, he sent me a Xerox of a pencil. And he said, ink this and bring it with you. And let me see how you handle, the inking of it. But whatever. So, and inking, I didn't know what he used. And he was, of course, he used July 170. So I was using rapidographs at the time, which are a far cry from the, Gelads. So I did my best with it and everything. And then, so I flew out. And so that was it. So I flew out there, and Fred Toole and his wife, Molly, picked me up at the airport on a Sunday, and I went out, and they drove me out to Hank's place in Pebble Beach, ushered me in with presents, and here I am, And he had this beautiful studio, all wooden, he's sitting there, like, behind his drawing table, and it was just like being ushered into the, the king's chambers. And he was very, this was like Sunday night. I got there on a Sunday. So I'm sitting there, and Fred and Molly were very nice, and they were really down home. They were still on the ride to the airport. They were very friendly, very open. So I was kind of at ease. They were kind of easing me up a little bit. Mm-hmm. But then, so Hank, shook my hand, and he asked me, so, he goes, okay, go back to my hotel. I had a room right across. He was renting some studios in Carmel Valley. He rented a couple of offices. So the artists were working there. So my hotel was like right across the street from there. So that was about a half-hour drive from Hank's. So then they drove me out, dropped me off. And then the next day was Monday. And I, went in and met the other 2 people. And that's how it started. So then Hank came in about lunchtime. It took us to lunch at the Carmel Valley Racket Club or something. And there was Clint Eastwood, there. Wow. Hey, Hank, how's it going?
Yeah.
And, Clint Eastwood. And Merv Griffin was there, in his white shorts, and he was like, playing tennis and everything. So, so he introduced Merv, this is Ron, Clint, this is Ron, whatever. So I said, oh my God, this is unbelievable,
Yeah.
And then we went back to the office after that, and they had already been working on some pages for the comic. So, I'm looking at their stuff, and their stuff was like beautiful, And then Hank proceeds to sit down and, get the tracing paper and start, going over everything.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, and I thought their stuff was amazing, So, it just immediately deflated by, courage. I was just, so that night I went back to my room, and I'm like, oh wow, he hasn't even seen what I can do yet, and, I don't know how this is going to work. it was very intimidating.
You thought he was overcritical or hypercritical or whatever?
Oh yeah, you know. Oh yeah. They were at that point. I think they were on like the 4th issue already.
Yeah.
Of the Marvel comic. I think they'd done like 4. So they were, this was all going on for months already.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuff was very, I thought it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just kind of, and I guess part of it was he was training too. So I mean, even if he liked it, he was going to change things just to kind of. And Hank's favorite expression was always, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Right.
When he would to completely, go over our layouts and stuff, and he would always preface it with that, there's more than one way to, and then of course we wanted to do it his way if we could.
Right. Right.
So then the rest of the 2 weeks, I just kind of went through it, and I kind of, I couldn't. I was stuck there. I couldn't run.
But you wanted to.
I felt like running. And so I just went in the next morning, and he had given me a page to rough out,
mm-hmm.
and I just kind of bluffed my way through. I just kind of. I said, no matter what I do, he's going to, correct. I mean, So I just, and he knew I was green. He knew I was nervous.
Yeah.
And so I kind of made it through the 2 weeks. I did a couple of pages.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the 2 weeks, he goes, so Ron, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know whether he was just going to send me back or, because he kind of kept me, he didn't really tell me. So like he says, Ron, so do you, like it out here, and then here we are in, Pebble Beach, Carmel Valley, Monterey, I said, and I was living in Jackson Heights in an apartment, so I said, yes, I do like it out here. And my wife, I was married and we didn't have any kids or anything, so he said, well, would you want to come out? So I said, absolutely. So that was like in August of '81.
Mm-hmm.
So then that was later, we had nothing, we had a couple of things to ship, but nothing much. We had an apartment, so we flew out in September of '81, and that was the beginning,
Wow.
And I still look back and go, I'm just in disbelief. And especially I look back at some of those comic pages I did, and I'm going, it's amazing he hired me, because with the critical eye that I have, now I go, wow, he really.
Yeah. So
But Hank was a great, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're more critical of your earlier work now than you were.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, And it's a funny thing with Hank. I mean, I liked him, and I think he liked me. You know what I mean? I think that was part of it.
Yeah.
Because I know it certainly wasn't my talent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we just kind of hit it off. There was just some kind of connection there, and he put up with a lot. But he was very nice to me. I mean, he was really, and it almost became like even his son Scott said, I think, you kind of had almost a father-son relationship. Even Scott kind of said that joking, I mean, Scott was 5 then. When I started, Scott was like 5.
Mm-hmm.
And, he goes, looking back, I really think, and I guess that,
Yeah, we've talked about the other people that have worked over the years, like Frank Hill and Lee Hawley, and I think that is the common thing, is he had to get along with the person as well as having some sort of artistic talent.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was part of it, especially with me, and and he liked us. He, he was, and then we moved to Pebble Beach, and we all worked together. Because we started out, he was at home, and we were in Carmel Valley, and then he finally bought the studio in Pebble, and then, of course, I guess you know this, then the Pebble Beach people said, no, we don't want, it was like a commercial, they didn't want any kind of commercial operation.
Right.
In Pebble Beach. So, because we would drive it in every day, and it was like 3 artists, and then the secretary, Fred, so we had 6 or 7 cars coming in, and it was like, so, and it was a big thing that, the paper, Mr. Wilson, Pebble Beach is throwing, Dennis out of, and it was like so then we had to leave there.
Right.
It was funny because I used to park, to avoid parking in the parking lot at lunchtime. I wanted to be able to just drive out to go somewhere. I started parking down the road, and there was this beautiful fence there, it was a house. But it was like, so I would park near the fence, and I did that for a couple of weeks, and then thinking, this is great, and then I would just walk down there and drive off. Come back and park. So after 2 weeks of this, all of a sudden I drove there one day, and there was these huge boulders put there. You know, so obviously the person who was not happy with me parking there.
Right.
You know? They brought in these enormous boulders that just took up the entire area, you know. So, you know, and then we moved back to Monterey into a studio, and then Karen and I were there, and then Hank was back in. So we were there for the last end of it, and then he sold that, and then I was working in Salinas.
Was that in the studio there, or is that out of your home?
No, it was that was my house, you know.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, because Hank sold, you know, he sold the Monterey. It was a historic landmark. So he sold it back to the city, and they, you know, it was they put it back. It's like, I think it's some kind of museum now. Mm-hmm. It was the Monterey, I forget the Monterey House or something. It's right across from City Hall. So then I was working out of my house in Salinas, and you know, I went from seeing, you know, working every day to like, you know, I'd still go show Hank my work, but I had to fax. Mm-hmm. So I would here I was living in Salinas, which was like 20 minutes from Hank, but I was faxing him. And I'd go maybe once a month or so to see him. You know, we do talk about it. But yeah, I was virtually. So that's when, you know, we were thinking, well, maybe we can move back east now. We didn't, you know, because this is like 15 years. We had been out there from 81 to 96.
Right.
And then, you know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I have a few questions actually, and this just kind of came up, and we've talked before, of course. So, but one thing I never asked was, so you sent in this packet to Hank Ketchum because you saw his address and everything. Did you apply or do anything else? I know you mentioned Archie, but did you were you very aggressive, like trying to get anything and everything? So if anything came along, or was just like you did the Archie thing, oh that didn't work, oh here's the Hank Ketchum thing, I'll try that. You know, I don't know how aggressive you were.
Yeah, you know, I was really not aggressive. No, I mean I went on a few things. I had a cousin who was in advertising, so he gave me a couple of references in the city. Mm-hmm. So I would go there and, you know, one-on-one and go into the office, you know. But I was not aggressive. I did a lot of stuff through the mail. I would mail things here and there. Mm-hmm. And but as far as being aggressive, no. And then actually in 77, my brother-in-law, my future, he was not married to my wife's sister yet, but he was living in Los Angeles. So we went out there a year after we were married, and we stayed with him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was in an apartment in Los Angeles. Went out, and my plan was to go back to Disney. I brought some work, and I was going to reapply and then go to Hanna-Barbera. So I did. So I brought my stuff out when we stayed with him, and I went to Hanna-Barbera and showed them my stuff, and they liked it. And Don Love, what was his name? Don Love or something. He was the guy, the screener back then. This is like 77. And so they had a training program going at that point in Hanna-Barbera, where you would actually work. You would do on-the-job training. You would actually do, you know, production work, but you wouldn't get paid. You know? It was like at night. You know, I think it was at night, or I'm not sure what it was. So they actually offered me. They said, you know, if you want to do this, you're welcome, you know, to program. But I wouldn't be getting paid. You know, but I mean, I'm sure the experience would have been invaluable working on, you know, whatever they were working on at the time. But I thought to move, and then I went back to Disney, and then they gave me a brochure, and so that, you know, that didn't go anywhere. But so the Hanna-Barbera thing, we thought, my wife and I thought about it. But you know, to move at that point, you know, would have been, and not to have it, you know, a paid job, to have, you know, to be doing. Yeah. We just didn't feel it was, you know, really, you know, worth the risk to do that, and what.
And at that point, were you more interested in doing strip art or comic books or animation, or any of them, whatever would take you? Did you have a preference?
Yeah, you know, at that time it was still animation, was still, you know, because that was really what I went to SVA for it. You know, I mean, I took that tradition and everything, but my desire, I took every animation class that they offered. You know? Okay. I mean, so my dream, my desire, you know, Disney was still my, you know, that was it for me. Yeah. Up until you know, the Hank thing, because I hadn't really thought. I think I had done a couple of comics, because I did, obviously, because I had the rejection slip. I did mail a few things to the syndicates, you know, at the time. I had a couple of little strips that I was working on, that I did mail out, which I still have my rejections. You know, when I do schools and stuff, I always bring that angle of it, of the fact that rejection, you know, is part of it.
Right.
And so I still have all my rejection letters from all the syndicates and everything, and actually from DC Marvel, because I did Marvel before I worked for Hank, you know, and I had done like this little call, you know, which I sent them, and then, you know, and I got a letter back saying your work is good, but it has to be great, you know, from Marvel, you know. So yeah, that was getting on. So I did, you know, but so I was thinking strips and comic books, but my heart was still at that point in, you know, in animation.
Okay. I was just curious about that because early on, but then you kind of explained it anyway. Early on, you tried Disney, got rejected, and then it's like, did you ever try again? And I get it. I mean, now I know, I understand why you don't, because you're doing this, but, you know. Yeah, but...
You know, years later, I contacted Disney just to tell them that I was working for Hank, you know. And they had a whole different attitude then, you know. I just said, I wasn't applying for a job. I just because I had some friends who were working there, and I just kind of, and they were like, you know, well, we don't know what you'd want to do here, but the fact that you work for Hank is certainly, you know, credible enough for us to consider whatever you want. But it never went anywhere.
Right.
But I thought it was interesting, you know, the attitude changed after, you know, you know, work for Hank, which is...
Well, definitely the studio changed since the 70s, you know, totally. You know, once Eisner took over, and then, you know, it's a completely different company than it was then. It was kind of a mom and pop shop when you were originally...
I mean, back then... The what? I'm sorry.
It was kind of a mom and pop shop when you were applying originally, you know.
Yes.
It wasn't this big corporate behemoth.
But still, all these guys, you know, because I was reading all these, like the New York Times did a big thing on what film did they release at the time? This was after The Fox and the Hound, and then they did...
Black Cauldron was after that.
Black Cauldron.
Yeah.
Black Cauldron.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Black Cauldron release, and they did this big thing on it, and I was seeing all the new artists that were coming in, like Don Bluth, you know, and all these people who were there at that point, and but it seemed like they were trying to just carry it over from the old guard to the new guard. Still, some of the old guard was still there, and I don't know. It was interesting.
Did you ever try for any of the other studios, like Filmation or even Don Bluth's studio or anybody else?
No. At that point, I think I was already, you know, like 81. I got the job with Hank. So I mean, I was looking at the, you know, I was subscribing to. There was in fact, Don Bluth had a magazine back then. Remember?
Right.
Yeah, I forget the name of it now.
I don't remember, but you did. Then another question, you mentioned when you got the sample from Hank to draw in the first place, was it actually a sketch or was it just a caption, or what did he send you? I was just curious.
Yeah, it was a caption. It was actually just the captions. He
sent
me like 5 or 6 gag slips.
Okay.
You know? And he just said, let me see what you do with these, you know.
Okay, so there's no real guidance at that beginning part. I was just kind of curious about it.
No, there was nothing. He just, let me see how you handle these. You know, so what I did was I kind of, you know, I went and got some of the old, you know, the books, and I kind of took some poses from different, you know, and tried to kind of, I mean, I was, you know, trying to use as much Hank influence as I could. But it didn't matter, because when he redid them, and you know, they were totally different, you know. He just, you know, I didn't, like, you know, it was funny. And then, you know, when I moved out, before, in the interim between the time he actually sent me back to New York to pack, I had done a little notebook where I was just doing sketches of all the characters, you know, Henry, George Wilson, and everything, which I was going to show him. You know, I was so proud, and it was just like filling up sketchbooks with pencils of the characters, you know. But they were all poses from his books, you know. So it was just I was virtually just copying, you know, the poses from the book. So then, after I'd been there a couple of days, you know, I proudly showed him this, you know, and he leaped through it, you know, and he recognized all the poses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's looking through it.
That's funny.
He goes, well, Ron. So he said, Ron, this whole thing, it seems a little incestuous, you know. Because he probably knew exactly where I got every pose. So so I guess it really wasn't, well, I don't know, maybe it wasn't really profitable to do that, but I thought I had to show him. And then, so then the thing was, the great thing, it was like working for Disney, because what he would do is he'd send us out sketching, Come in and he'd go, all right, 9 in the morning, he goes, all right, why don't you go out and sketch today? You did the Fisherman's Wharf or something, and just go out and sketch, and then come back after lunch, and I'll look through your sketchbooks,
Mm-hmm.
So we would do that. So then three of us, we'd separate, we'd all go out, and then we'd come back, and, we'd show him our sketchbooks, and he'd proceed to say, no, yeah, I mean, don't be so, like with my critique, I would use pencil, So he would say, use a fine errors back then and everything, He goes, because I want you to start interpreting things in terms of like a single line, not a sketchy line,
Mm-hmm.
So he was trying to get us to think in line, not in like sketchy, Although his pencil sketches were, beautiful, but, So that was always like his critique of my stuff. He would say, just get a flair. Just get a flair and just let it down, just follow, So yeah, there was stuff like that. And then he actually enrolled us. There was they had some kind of classes in layout and advertising. So we actually Karen and I took a class for a semester.
Mm-hmm.
That he, in layout and design. It was some kind of design class, just to kind of, and this said we'd already been there a few years, and so he was always just trying to get us to, to learn,
Yeah, I should mention, you mentioned Karen, so I'll say it's Karen Machette, who also worked for Dennis the Menace for quite a few years with you. So, and then you mentioned Fred Toole. I'll mention that he was a writer for many years, for people who don't know, on the Dennis comic books and things like that. And I'll ask you a question about him. How was he to work for? I mean, was he complicated to work for? Or Fred Toole.
Yeah, no, Fred, he was the quietest guy in the world. He was and his wife was like a real Earth Mama type. Really, we would go over there sometimes, for like holidays and stuff, and she'd make hot chocolate or whatever it was, and she'd bake stuff. So yeah, the three of us, would go over, and Hank would come over sometimes, and they were very, very hospitable. But Fred was very quiet. He's very, very quiet.
Mm-hmm.
They get much, he'd kind of look at you and with a little smile, but very nice, And actually, at one point, we would meet in the, we had to stop. We tried to stop taking all the cars into the studio when we were in Pebble Beach, and we would meet at Del Monte Shopping Center, which was like about a mile down the road outside the gates of Pebble Beach. The three of us would meet Fred there. And we would all carpool from Del Monte into the. We would all meet there. The four of us would be car, and this was kind of like toward and then this is like halfway through the year, and it's already when we were thinking that is Hank going to renew the contract, with Mars. So the three of us were kind of like, and Fred, really didn't even know, he wasn't sure what was going either,
right,
as far as the the contract, whether Hank was going to renew it or not. So that's like scared. What do you think, Fred? Is and he really didn't know much either. So
yeah,
those are kind of tense times,
Right. We will be back after this message.
Hi, I'm George Takei. You know me as Helmsman Sulu on Star Trek. When I'm not busy going Warp Factor 8, I like to beam down to Lee's Comics in Mountain View and spend a lazy afternoon reading comics classics from Marvel to DC, from Dark Horse to Fantagraphics, and everything in between. So please, spend some time here at Lee's Comics and spend your hard-earned cash.
The Fun Ideas podcast is made possible by listeners like you and from Lee's Comics of California, selling you what your mother threw out since 1982, online at leescomics.com. And now back to the Fun Ideas podcast. And you said that before. It was all Hank's choice as to whether to continue the comic book. It wasn't Marvel's choice, right?
Right. Marvel, as far as I remember, Marvel and King Features, also, they wanted to, they all wanted to renew it.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to do. King thought he's put a lot of work into this. He's training 3 people, and I guess he wasn't happy with the way comics. This was like in the 81, 82, 83.
Right.
Comic book stores Monterey there was like a comic book store that we would go to.
Mm-hmm.
But Hank's critique was always, they're selling these things at like airports and whatever, and he just didn't think the distribution. He didn't like the distribution of comic books at that point.
Yeah.
He was very critical of the way they were being. I think that's really before the whole thing exploded. With the comic stores. I mean, they were just kind of coming in.
Yeah, there was a time there, that is correct, about that same time, before the direct market took over, that comic books were kind of dying on the vine, as it were. So,
they were. Yep.
Now, did you fear for your job at that point, or did Hank immediately offer you the strip work?
No, I didn't know. At that point, I was still grateful. I had been there, for at that point probably 8 or 9 months, and I was happy because I got hired by Hank. I was ready to, if that was going to be it, so be it. I was ready to go back to New York. My wife was saying, hey, I had 8 or 9 months working for Hank Ketchum. That should be worth something.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was good. I was good. I mean, whatever had happened, I was resigned. We were still renting an apartment, so we hadn't bought. We had no roots there yet. So I kind of and Karen too. I think Karen. I think all three of us were kind of like, okay, with it.
How soon after that he canceled the comic that he said, "I'd like you to stay on and work on the strips with me"?
Well, it was almost like instantaneous. He told us and Brian had done. He had gotten a job with Jim Davis.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
He was he was a little stressed, so he was actually sending out. I wasn't doing anything, but Brian, when he got an inkling, he was sending out little feelers,
right,
strips and stuff, and because he had a young wife, he was quite a few years younger than me, and he was newly married, and so he, by the time everything ended, he'd already got an offer, from Jim Davis.
Mm-hmm.
So, and totally on the strength of working for Hank, he Jim Davis said, "Yeah, you work for Hank, man,"
Mm-hmm.
And so he flew out to Indiana and he was working on Garfield.
Mm-hmm.
And so Karen and I, we stayed because Karen was, she was single at that point, and she, it just kind of transitioned. He just said he would start bringing us some Sundays, because oh gosh, I knew I was going to. Who was doing the Sundays?
It was Bob Bug. Yeah. I knew.
Bob Bug. Sorry. That's one name of it. I have a whole list of names in front of me. I don't want to forget anyone. I forgot. I didn't write them.
Don't worry, I'll help you out.
So Bob Bug, so Hank would bring in, and he was doing this totally on his own. I think. I don't think Hank was giving him any. He was just. So Hank would bring in Bob's Sundays, and he'd show them to us, and he'd say, and we thought, "Wow, my God, these are amazing," And he'd say, and then he kind of told us that he had this was still while we were in Pebble Beach, and he wanted to bring Bob in, but Bob was older, and I think he had grandchildren already, so I think, Hank wanted him to move out.
Yeah, I think he was in Connecticut, if I remember. That I don't remember, but I think it's somewhere like that. Yeah,
he was, Connecticut. Yeah. So Bob, I guess, said, Hank, I got too many roots here, and so that was, a lucky break for us.
Mm-hmm.
Because, so he put Karen and I on the Sundays, and then, so it just kind of, it was just a gradual thing.
Yeah. I remember when that happened, actually. It was like, I said, hey, the Sunday strips now look like the comic books did at the end. I didn't know who was working on it because you never got name credit, or Karen, so it's like, I just said, wow, they changed it over to make it look like the comic books.
That's interesting. Oh, wow, that's funny.
Because Bob had his own kind of style. Well, everybody had his own style, so you could see it change over the years, so.
Yep. But Bob, Hank loved Bob's work,
Mm-hmm.
And although he had kind of developed kind of his own little styles there too,
yeah.
But it was fun, and I mean, Hank really, I really want Bob out there, but I guess,
So after you took over, I guess Bob just retired basically at that point.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I never met him. I never really. I don't know. I think he did freelance stuff. I'm not. I kind of lost track. I just, I felt bad, in a way.
Right.
But, it was just kind of like it just happened,
Now, you said Brian went on to work for Jim Davis and Garfield. Did you put any feelers out for anything else at this time, or just kind of...
No, I didn't. I was taking it one day at a time. I was, because, here I was in California, and I said, well, I definitely wasn't, if this ended, I was definitely not going to, probably not going to stay. I was probably going to come back east, because I was still like a New Yorker at heart.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, my family was here and everything. So, I didn't even think about it. I probably would have just hopped on the first plane out. We would have come back. The funny thing was, about 6 months before, when I started the correspondence with Hank, I had taken the post office test.
Mm-hmm.
And, I went down to the city, to the main branch, on 42nd Street, huge. And, I was just trying other options. I thought, well, if this doesn't. So, and this room was like, it was like a block wide with the, applicants,
Mm-hmm.
huge. Just, you can imagine the main branch of the post office in Manhattan. So I took the test, not knowing how I studied for it. I was like, and this is when the Hank thing was still not even, I don't even know how to start corresponding with him yet. This was just one of my options. I was trying to feel out because I was approaching my 30th birthday. Mm-hmm. And I had some friends who were working for the post office, and they said, it's a great gig and, everything. So I took it, and then I guess I did okay. So the first year I'm out in California, so, I started in September of 81. So that December, the beginning of December, we had this apartment in Monterey, and there's a knock on the door, and it's actually the post office. It was a hand-delivered letter from the post office in New York, saying that I was hired for Christmas, duty.
Oh.
And I was supposed to report to Harold, to the main branch in Manhattan, like the following Monday or something. So they hand me this letter, which is, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, isn't that hilarious? So on the bottom of the letter, so I just started with Hank, and I'd been there a couple of months. Not sure what was going to happen. So on the bottom of the letter it said, if you wish to remain on the list, check this box. If not, So I thought, okay, well, I don't know. So I checked the box, to remain on the list. I said, why not? So that was it. So they, so the next year, the same thing happened. I was, I'm here and the knock on the door, and it's the post office, and they're saying I had to report for, office duty at the. So this had been like a year and a half. So, I was pretty solid. By then, I'd already started on the Sunday and everything. So I didn't check the box,
Okay.
But I think that was my last. Yeah, I think I had one more opportunity to remain on the list.
Right.
So I said no. I'm not gonna,
Good for you. No, I was just curious. Yeah, I still check the box.
Yeah, really. I thought about it, but I said, nah. I guess I'm, whatever.
Have to have options. Yeah. If this Dennis thing in 2019 doesn't work out, I will still check the. I'll go to the post.
And sometimes I think back, isn't that funny? If I gotten the job in the post office, my whole life would have been totally.
Exactly.
I've probably been retired by now. I don't know.
Now let's flash forward to a few years. I talked to Marcus Hamilton, who does the dailies now, and I know all his stories and everything, and I might interview him at a separate time again for the podcast. But
good.
Was there ever a time when this transition was happening in '94, I believe, where you were considered for the dailies, or did you just not want that much work, or did Ketchum want to keep it separate? What was the deal there?
That was it. Because as years before that, Karen and I were doing dailies. Hank would give us dailies to do, along with the Sundays, And I guess so. I don't know what he was thinking. He would give us dailies. So if you look back, in some of those years, we actually, there were times that we were doing a couple, not quite a few, but Karen and I were doing them. But he wasn't saying. He would just kind of give me, let's see how you do with this. So he'd throw us a daily, and then we do it. And then he'd run them, and to our amazement, he'd use them and he'd put them in there, and without the notch, he wouldn't sign them. He would sign them,
Right.
But
okay.
He would put the notch in there, so that meant, it was officially not his. But anyway, so we were doing them, and we didn't. I don't know. But then time went on, and he was actually, I don't. He never really sat down and said, I want to use guys to start training. He never really said that. He would just kind of give us dailies to do.
Now, would you have preferred to have taken on the dailies, or no?
I don't know. I mean, I was comfortable with the Sundays then.
Yeah.
And Hank always had the attitude, that they were two different animals.
Right.
The daily was one thing he did, and because he did Sundays for a couple of years when it started. And they were, beautiful Sundays. So you've seen some of his Sundays, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, he did it. And very clever, stuff. He would put himself in there. I remember there's one, and he actually had a photo of himself in the corner drawing.
Yeah.
So he was doing all sorts of kind of creative things with the Sundays, But he knew that wasn't going to. I think he just figured,
Right.
He didn't. So we always looked at them like they were two different.
Right, because I know he gave the Sundays eventually to Al Weisman and then Lee Hawley and everybody else. But it seemed like the people that worked on the comic books tended to work on the Sundays, so I guess that's why I was thinking it's more sequential art, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the daily was like a whole. It was really, and I always approached it like that too. When he would give me dailies, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It's up this big rectangle, and you gotta. It's a really whole. There are no balloons, to hide behind and stuff. It was just all there. So yeah, it was kind of interesting.
But even to this day, you occasionally do a daily. Don't you guys switch it off sometimes?
Yeah. I mean, I'll do one. Because like Marcus does a lot of the computer stuff. Because he's very adept at Photoshop. So whenever there's like side things to do, sometimes he'll need help with it. And then Scott's doing some dailies now too.
Okay.
So yeah. I mean, occasionally I would fill in Marcus one or two, but now Scott's kind of picking up the slack too. He's doing more dailies too.
Now I know you had a number of writers, but do you ever write the material at all, or just suggest ideas or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I've written a couple. The funny thing is, like, I was working with Scott, and Scott's like, Ron, you've been doing this for how many years? Certainly you could. So I did write a couple when Scott, prodded me to.
Mm-hmm.
So I did. I wrote a couple, and then he liked them, and then we ran those, and then. But I don't know. It's early on. No, I mean early on the writers. We would even with Hank, we would do a lot of. We'd have sit down sessions. It was funny when Marcus started. We had that was with the daily gags, but we sat down, and he had given us both a package of dailies to pick out the ones we liked, and that was when Marcus came out for the week. He came out for a week, and to interview for the job and everything.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we had like a sit down session where we would all pick the gags that we like, and then we'd have to defend them, in front of Hank, Yeah, defend our choices, So that was kind of stressful. But yeah, I mean, Hank was, he great editor, he could always just rewrite these things and make them sing, and then the writers, so he had more of a relationship with the writers, and so what was your question? No, but yeah.
No, I was just asking mainly about, that was about the writers, because, I mean, I asked if you wrote any of your own material, but I know that you guys use a few writers, and I know Scott writes a few, but anybody can basically contribute, right, if they have a pretty good idea, right? Is that how that kind of works?
Oh, yeah.
It's like a big team.
Yeah.
And forgive me, I don't remember all the writers' names, because I interviewed a few for the book, but, there's quite a few different writers, so, but...
Just Hank was never, he always never hid the fact that he used writers. He was always like, Carson used writers, Bob Hope used writers, and his attitude was always, listen, if you're doing everything yourself, and then, you're gonna reach a max point, where you're gonna, and so he always, he never really,
So he even used writers on his on the panel when he was doing it himself, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. See, I even wasn't totally sure of that, if he was that selfish about that. But yeah.
There was an old NCS, one of the early ones from the 60s or 70s, where he did a little single panel. I think it was one of the Rubin things, and in it, he did a drawing of Dennis, and with appreciation, too, and he listed all the writers.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that. There's like 20 people listed or something like that.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Because he listed all the writers and the artists and everybody who was, involved, which was great. And, and he always paid top. He was always, always treated us right as well, So he's
So now these days, I mean, you've been doing this how many years? 30 years, 40 years? Too many years.
81. 81. That's 38 years.
And, wow. And
I know.
I did a recent podcast interview with Joe Staten and also with Mike Curtis, who both work on Dick Tracy now.
Right.
And,
right.
They kind of, they're happy to do it and love it, but, they kind of bemoan the fact that, comic strips aren't the way they used to be, where you go grab a newspaper, you're looking on, like, gocomics.com and everything like that. I mean, how do you and the staff, Scott Ketchum and Marcus and everybody else, treat it now? I mean, is it frustrating, or it's business as usual?
Like, I'm here, and I'm in the Catskills. I live in upstate New York. I live in Middletown area.
Yep.
And actually, Dennis is in 4 newspapers around here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, on any given Sunday, I can go out. I get the Kingston paper, the Star Ledger in Jersey. I get the, the Star Ledger Kingston, the Newsday in New York, which I can get up here. But, yeah, some of them are local. But if I go to 3 or 4 different stores around here, I can get, like, 4 different newspapers that still carry Dennis,
Yeah. Well,
so
I do have to say we do carry it here with the Eugene Register Guard, so it is in our local paper too. So.
Yeah, no, but I know it. Yeah. So I'm not, but I know, like, the Post used to have it, and they don't have any comics now at all. But the New York Post, that was our big thing, New York. We had the Post,
Yeah.
But now they got rid of their whole comics page. But I remember they used to run the Sunday on Saturday because they didn't have a Sunday Post. So on the Saturday they would run the Sunday.
Oh.
It was in black and white, so it was interesting. That was fun to look at. But I know what you mean. It's the newspapers, they're kind of like, I don't know. I just try, and I sit next to my computer and you go online, you go on, Comics Kingdom, and you see it there, and comments, people still commenting on it, and whether good or bad, whatever. But there's still, so it's and then now, like, Antenna TV is going to have a Dennis the Menace Marathon Thanksgiving weekend.
Right. Yeah, the J North one. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're going to show the whole 4 seasons. 4 seasons. Mm-hmm. And so I mean, it's like, I don't know. Dennis. I think Dennis is it's part of the vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless, and then of course they're comparing Donald Trump to Dennis, and they have the whole Donald Trump thing.
Right.
But Trump is Dennis growing up in the hair, the law. Dennis is just such a part of society. Right. And the funny thing is, like, I do my daughter-in-law is a 3rd grade teacher, so every year I do her class, among others, but I do hers. So she goes in. So like a couple weeks before I start, she'll ask the class, how many? She has about 30 students, whatever, 29, 30. So she'll go, how many of you guys have heard of Dennis? So maybe a couple of hands go up. So she goes. So I go. So what I do is I'll give her comic books. I'll give her. She'll show the. You go on YouTube and show them the cartoons, the TV show, and I'll do some sketches. And so 2 weeks before. So by the time I get there, these kids are so excited. Wow. They've been inundated with all this Dennis stuff, Then they go. I'll give her the dolls. I have some of the dolls. She'll bring them in, put them up on her desk and stuff. So by the time I get there, these kids are all jazzed, So it's very interesting, It really, for Dennis, it really wouldn't take much to, get him back in the boat,
Well, I recently did a podcast where I was the guest, and I was talking about my Pocket Full of Dennis book, plug.
Yep.
But a question was asked of me, and I didn't really have a good answer, so I'll ask you. Are there any new projects, like movies or TV shows, cartoons, or anything in the planning at this point?
Yeah, Scott has told me of a couple of things that he's been approached about.
Okay.
About a new movie. And Warner Brothers, I think they still have their hand in somewhere along the line.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure because I know that there was like 3 or 4 movies, one with Walter Matthau and one with Don Rickles and one with I always forget the guy.
Robert Wagner.
Yeah, Robert Wagner. And then there was the animated series, a couple different ones during the 90s, and they still get play and they're on home video and stuff. And so I thought, well, those get play, but is there anything new? I don't know. So it's like,
Scott. It's great having Scott there because he's young and he's a very attractive personality, and he's very and people love him. So he's out there, and he's doing some good connections. I mean, he's making some good connections out there, and he tells me once in a while, they're talking about maybe doing a new movie.
Okay.
And as far as the book, we're always getting about doing a collection of Sundays and stuff. We did one in Japan.
Oh.
We did a couple of this. Yeah, in Japan, there's this guy who every year he releases one in Japan of the dailies and Sundays. He does 2 different, and they're little, pocket-sized books. And so there's things out there, And now King, they have they're really getting very aggressive now about marketing. They have T-shirts now on the website, Dennis T-shirts. And I always share it on Facebook and stuff. So I mean it's out there. It's just the funny thing is, I mean, when I just in my everyday experience going out in the street and they say, wow, Dennis the Menace, it's like they, so you're still treated like, wow, Dennis the Menace. And it's I don't even think of it anymore. Like, I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. In fact, on Halloween night, I shouldn't really say this story, but I was going, my wife and I were going through Pine Bush, which is our town, and there were trick-or-treaters out, on the street. So I was coming from my son's house, which is about a half hour away, and I was coming in, and I made their left into Pine Bush. Not where the trick-or-treaters were, but I was going like, it was at 35, and I was going like 45, I think. So all of a sudden, bam, the police, the lights come on behind me, So I pull over, and the cop gets out, and he goes, okay, you got to watch it. There's trick-or-treaters out there. So he looks at my license, and, and I said, well, I honestly didn't know what I did. I didn't realize I was going 40, because 45 isn't really that fast either.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize they were really out that night for the trick. So anyway, he looks at my license, and he let me, he goes, all right, just watch your speed. He's very nice. So then he asked me what I did for a living. I don't know, And I said, I draw Dennis the Menace. He goes, you're kidding me. He goes, you are kidding me, man. I said, no, I do. And then I said, would you like cartoon? He said, so now I'm actually, I'm working on it. He gave me his son's name. He has an 8-year-old son, and I'm going to put the son in it and stuff. So,
Wow.
He goes, yeah, just, So, it's you see all this stuff and you go, So there's still a lot of excitement out there, for Dennis. And this guy was not an old guy. He was probably in his late 30s, early 40s,
Yeah, well, like I said, I know younger people have seen the movies, they've seen the cartoon shows. They may or may not have seen the Jay North series, but, it's like...
Right.
So, and, even though there's not new paperbacks, those are still kind of available in thrift stores and things like that. I see them pretty regularly, so they're around,
Forget about it. Right. Online, I mean, and, Hank...
And online,
yeah. And Hank, well, at least in the cartooning culture, I mean, Hank is still considered, master.
Right.
I mean, I get such a joy of posting his every day. I post one of his cartoons on Facebook.
Right.
And I've got these people who are, a lot of really established, cartoon, and they just, they're still in awe,
Mm-hmm.
Some of them I post, and they're just like, oh my God, look at that line work, And, it's just amazing,
Right.
So it's just so much fun to see, Hank still getting appreciated. And there's, this website, devoted to Hank's work, and so, it's just, being part of it, was exciting, just being...
And then 2021 will be the 70th anniversary of the strip, and it's just it's a little bit ahead of time. But I'm just curious: is there anything in the planning that you know of yet? I know there's a few things on the 65th. I know because I have a Dennis at 65 and stuff like that. So
right.
But
I'm sure there will be. I don't know. I guess we're not. I haven't heard of.
Okay.
But it's definitely 70 years is going to be a milestone.
And I assume you'll still be along for the ride. You're not retiring anytime soon.
Lord willing. I mean, I still love it. The thing is, I love it. I love doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's so, the characters were designed so beautifully.
Yeah. And I asked Marcus that as well. I said, any time for retirement? The last time I spoke to him, he goes, no, I love it. Just like you said. Yeah. So, I guess as long as everyone will have you, you'll do it, which is great.
That's it. I mean, it's just, and now with Scott on board, it's like a whole new energizing, because Scott is very creative,
Yeah.
And he's very talented, and he sees so, I mean, we're looking at new things and new, colors and stuff. So it's always fresh,
Yeah.
And, so, I mean, and still, I see him on Sunday in the paper, it's fun to see him online, but to see him, still get a newspaper and open it and see, Dennis in there, it's still kind of cool,
Now, do you have any other things you like to do or wish you could do, or both?
No, not really. I mean, and now I have we have our first grandchild,
Uh-huh. Well, congratulations.
So, and the little, Cameron, so I'm doing cartoons of him now for my daughter-in-law, everything. Like his birthday's the end of this month. So, I post something on Facebook and, I put Cameron and cartoon Cameron in there and stuff. I mean, that's just what I kind of do. And I do, Dennis stuff. I mean, I do, I don't know if you notice on birthday wishes on Facebook. I'm always
right.
Happy birthday.
And you sent me some, and I appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
And I still get a lot of charity stuff. Requisitions. I just I a couple a week. With it. And those are very gratifying. And they get the thank you letters. From people.
So no regrets of not working at the post office then.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, the postal workers too. I just did one for one of the postal workers. She just had a baby. So
oh, okay.
Then it's for her, and it's just because Hank always said you have a gift, and don't because he tells a story once he was in Paris. I think it was Paris, and he forgot his wallet. He went to a bank, and he went in there and he didn't have any ID. And the guy wasn't speaking French, and I don't know if he wanted to withdraw some money or whatever he wanted to do. So the guy looked at him and said, so he asked for a piece of paper, so he drew Dennis.
Yeah.
And he says, I could have bought the bank.
Wow.
The guy was so excited, to see Dennis. So I mean Hank, he always stressed, always it's good to share it,
Oh.
And,
I didn't ask you, and I should ask you, just if things have changed. I mean, I know you said eventually you moved back to New York. When was that?
Yeah. That was in '96.
Okay, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
And do you still draw Dennis the same way on paper, or do you now do it digitally or anything? Some people transition. So.
Oh yeah. No. So far, it was still. I mean, I scan stuff now and stuff, but I'm still pretty much old school.
That's cool.
And we are, Mark is still, we're still pretty much old school. The color, the color's done. We do color guides,
Do you do your own? Do you do your own coloring, or does somebody else do it?
No. I still do it, on marker and number.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. No, I number. Yeah, I do a color guide in, markers, and then, but Scott is he's very creative with the color, so he's actually taking me in places I blending and this and that. So yeah, he's trying to get some more interesting color stuff going in some areas. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see. But they translate it very well. I'll do a color. They're pretty good with following the color guides. Reed Brennan. But yeah, it's still we're still pen and ink, and I always think about, wow, imagine drawing with a tab. I mean, it'd be like,
well, I mentioned Dick Tracy again, and this Joe.
Yeah.
When Joe does his strips, he draws and inks the Sundays. He only draws the dailies, but on the Sundays he'll ink it the traditional way. But Shelley Plager, she inks the dailies, and she does it on the computer. So,
wow, yeah.
But
Yeah, I know.
just a different style, So I was just curious, It's like
no, and then in a lot of cases you really can't tell,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't.
In the case of Dick Tracy, you can't. It's like
yes, and sometimes it's really hard to, And I was thinking, man, I still haven't even mastered the pencil yet, and here I am going to move on to the the computer. I mean, it's like, and then you look at Disney. I mean, it's going back a couple of years, but they were saying that when they want to get I forget which movie had just come out on computer, and then they said, and it was an interview with some of the animators, and they said when they want to get inspired in the studio, they go back and look at Fantasia.
Right.
I mean, that's what they sit there in awe and go, oh my God, they did this without a computer. They did this with a pencil.
Right. Right.
And they just sit there and just go, oh my gosh, And so I never forgot that. It's just that I forget who it was that said that in one of the interviews.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I don't know. I mean, that's still old school. I mean,
yeah, no need to change. I was just curious. Some people have, some people they haven't. And I always like reading about technique. I mean, I can draw, but it's like I'm no professional, so that's why I'm always curious. Like in Hogan's Alley, you've probably seen that magazine. They'll talk about people's techniques and drawing styles and what they use and types of pens and types of brushes and which hand they use and all that stuff. So,
what I try to see, if you go back over my Facebook posts, over the years, I mean, it's been, I have all Hank's pencils on, the ones, I mean, I have a few that I kept, and over the years, but, I put them on there, and then, people look at Hank's pencil and, oh my God, that's so beautiful, and, his pencils are, a lot of them are pretty rough, but, it's there, you look at it and you go, wow, I mean, he captures everything, And watching him was like an amazing. When he used to sit there and draw, either correct your stuff or like sometimes you go in and he'd be inking a panel or something, and you'd be talking to him or looking over his shoulder, and just watching him ink, was just like unbelievable.
Was he really consistent on how he did things? Because sometimes Ketchum would draw something that seemed really polished, and other times it seemed like he just dashed it out, like it was just a quickie sketch, But was that just what he felt like at that time, or?
That is true. I know, and as the later stuff, he got looser. He got almost more impressionistic, right? It was like almost like a cartoon impressionism, and I think he was striving for that. I think. I know you go through his different periods, like when he was very, very, everything was very tight and very, everything was there, the toaster, every, bolt and everything. And then later on, so it's true, he did kind of evolve, And I know, before he retired, semi-retired, he never really retired. I mean, I actually have a fax which he sent me the night of his passing.
Mm-hmm.
I have which I framed. He was actually correcting my work the day that he passed. It was like hours before.
Right.
I have a fax from him.
Mm-hmm.
I think I used it in the book. Yeah.
You gave it to me. It gave me a copy of it, and it is in the
know.
book. So if you want us to take a look at it, check out my book. But I appreciate that. Amazing. So,
and but it was interesting to see his different eras.
Mm-hmm.
Every decade was, he was constantly evolving.
Yeah. Because one day, I don't know if you know who Craig Yo is. He's a book publisher and a cartoonist too. Yeah, and he was talking about. He basically said, which is not necessarily an insult, but I get what he says. He says Hank Ketchum is my favorite and my least favorite artist.
Really?
Yeah, and it basically depends on how he's drawing.
It's like, that's interesting. That's funny. Wow.
And he's being kind of flippant and tongue-in-cheek, but I get it. You know, that's why I was asking you about it, so.
I know, that is true. That is true, you know. And then, you know, right before he kind of evolved, and then he did, you know, you've seen some of his paintings, right, which he kind of did after he, semi-retired, And they were very, you know, he was really capturing the very loose stuff and, you know, impressionistic, and I think we're still searching, you know, for what he was going to, but, you know, he was trying all different techniques and everything, you know.
Yeah.
But that was the thing about it, he was just so creative, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd come in, for me, you know, working in the studio with him, you know, I'd come in the morning, right, and we'd be working on Sunday, you know, and he was with me every step of the way. And then, you know, I go home, and I, you know, have an evening, and I'd come in the morning, and you know, Hank would be sitting there, and he'd go, you know, I was thinking about that panel at 2 in the morning, you know. I woke up, and I was, you know, so, I mean, here he, you know, I come in the morning, and here he was waking up at 2 in the morning and thinking about some layout for my Sunday, you know, and I go, oh my gosh, you know, he was just, and when computers started, you know, because we kind of got, you know, well, I guess the late 80s when the home computers started coming in, right, you know, so he was drawing, you know, he was already drawing Dennis. He was so proud. He'd call us in, you know, he had one of his office at the studio, and he'd say, look, I just drew Dennis, and he had done this, like, Dennis drawing on the computer. We'd all go, wow, you know, and it was true, you know, he was just trying to really stay on the edge, you know, and just kind of keep those juices flowing, you know.
Right.
Yeah. It was a great time, you know. I miss, you know, that's what I'm really thankful for, having worked with him, and then meeting, you know, like, Eldon Zadini and Gus Ariola, you know.
Oh, yeah. All those
out there, you know, it was such a
Carmel people or Monterey people or Cannery Row people.
Yeah. And then, you know, going to the, you know, the Doc's Ricketts lab, you know, they were all members there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And having lunch, you know, he's taking us to lunch in Doc Ricketts and seeing Eldon's work, hanging all the cartoons that they did. It was, you know, I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I was really grateful for it. And, you know, it was really a lucky, you know, it's not something I was even looking for, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's similar to Marcus's story. I mean, I always am fascinated about his story where he's working at Walmart and then the next day he gets the call, you know. It's like, wow. And he got it from not a magazine like you, but he got it from the 700 Club. That was his story, you know. And it's like, wow.
I know. It's amazing, you know. And then he came out and we hit it off, you know. We just hit it off so well, and it was great.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Yeah, you know, I mean, it was just, whatever.
Well, I wish you continued success with Dennis as long as you want to do it. And is there any way anybody can get in contact with you if they want or a website or anything you'd like to plug?
No, my address is 201 Birchwood Drive, Pine Bush, New York. I just opened the door to, but you know, I don't mind. I mean, I get, you know, I'm getting my address is out there because I get letters all, you know, all the time. But that's fine. I don't really. It doesn't bother me.
Okay, you're a New Yorker. You're tough. You're tough.
And then, you know, Facebook. I mean, you know, I'm on Facebook there if they want to see Hank's work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah.
All right.
And I really enjoyed the book, by the way. You know.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And yes, you know, for a plug for me, yes, if you want to get Pocket Full of Dennis the Menace, it is in hardback, paperback, or ebook versions. You can get it on Amazon and through Bear Manor Media. And I interviewed this man, Marcus Hamilton, and I interviewed Karen, I interviewed Lee, I interviewed Frank, and a few others. I didn't interview Hank, unfortunately, because he had passed away, but I got some good quotes from the past from him. So
I use it as kind of a you know, I keep it right by my drawing table.
Well, thank you.
Just to kind of, as a reference, I use it kind of as, you know, it's just fun to open it, you know, and just see where it, sometimes I just open it up and just start reading, you know, just get lost in wherever it is. Dave Swartz, you know. You know Dave Swartz, you know.
Yes.
And he's a great guy. I mean, I met him out there. That was, he's still writing. He's still writing for Dennis.
Sounds good.
But yeah, it's a great book. It's really, did a great job.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you, Ron. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Ron Ferdinand, for being my special guest. Episode number 57 will be coming soon. If you would like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. Become a Patreon of Mark Arnold and Fun Ideas Productions. If everyone listening just contributed $1 a month, that would be a tremendous help in continuing the production of my books and this podcast. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. The opening and closing music for the Fun Ideas podcast is provided courtesy of Andrew the Slow Poisoner Goldfarb and is used with permission. This has been the Fun Ideas podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2020, Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you, and good night.
Pills in the pink electric church. The final flicker of your lewd jeweled boob to